Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday with me about immigration to Canada. My name is Al Parsai. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I teach immigration consulting at Ashton College. I'm the author of this book, 88 Tips on Immigration to Canada, which is the bestseller book on Amazon.ca under the immigration law. I would like to talk about a few updates in the world of immigration this year and this week specifically. And also, if you have any generic questions about immigration to Canada, I will answer them. Of course, if you have specific questions, then you need to consider booking appointments with me. But if you have generic questions, just post them in the chat box. And then after I'm done with my updates, I will answer those questions one by one. So one issue that I would like to talk about recent developments is express entry. So the government has continued inviting Canadian experience class under the express entry, and that has resulted in reducing the CR score to 400, which is amazing. So the last draw, they invited 6,000 people, and the lowest score was 400, and that's 400 out of 1,200, which is great for those people who are inside Canada and they have Canadian experience. The other, and of course, if you have if you have applied under federal skilled worker class or federal skilled trades class, unfortunately, since January, no one has been invited under those two groups unless you were selected by a province to apply through that province, because when a province selects you, then you receive up to 600 extra points, and then you could be invited. In fact, government ran a draw specific to provincial nominee program for express entry a day or two before the main invitations, and the lowest score was 717, which was the lowest as we know of. And 717 is significant because if you deduct 600 points, it means that the person who applied had only 117 points. And that means that pretty much anybody who was selected by a province and they had 117 or more points, they were invited by the government of Canada. So that's enough for express entry. In terms of parental sponsorship, many people ask me this question, that when the government is going to run the draw for parental sponsorship. We don't have the news yet as we speak. Last year, the draw was in October, so they may run the draw by the end of summer or maybe early fall. They haven't specified that, or maybe even tomorrow they may run the draw. But if they do, they have promised to invite 30,000 people to apply, which is 3 times more than what the number of people that they invited last year. And in terms of other issues, it's mostly nowadays about travel restrictions and how they prevent people from traveling to Canada. There are some rumors going on, and actually based on a request, direct request that made by the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, he requested from the federal government to close the borders, at least for Ontario, to international students temporarily. If that happens, then international students may not travel to Canada. And Shanli says, good morning, Mr. Parsai. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So you keep that in mind, that because of that, if that happens, then international students may not be able to travel to Canada for now. To the best of my knowledge, federal government has not decided yet, but they are considering that. In terms of hotel quarantine, Many people have found out that if they travel to the United States, then they may cross the border by land. And if they cross the border by land, then they may not face quarantine at a hotel, which is great news for them. And because of that, whoever has a visa to the United States have traveled to the States and they're traveling by land. This has caught the attention of the Premier of Ontario, and he has requested the federal government to make some changes and add a quarantine hotel to land crossings as well. So we don't have any response from the federal government, but they may go in that direction. So we have to wait and see. And especially because of the surge in the number of infections. So in Ontario, last year, this time, the maximum number of infections we had per day was around 300 to 400 per day. Nowadays, last week we in certain days we passed 4,000 per day, and the numbers have dropped recently. For example, yesterday we had around 3,400. Yet it's much more than what we had last year at this time. The only difference is that now we have vaccine, and Canada is actually administering vaccines at a huge rate. Many people are receiving vaccines nowadays. For example, in Ontario alone, they are administering more than 100,000 vaccinations per day. The population of Ontario is 15 million. So considering that about 5 million of them, they are children under 18 or more, maybe more than 5 million under 18, it means that about only 10 million people need to receive vaccines. So far, way more than 5 million of Ontarians have received their first dose of vaccine. This means that hopefully by the end of May, almost every Ontarian has received their first dose. And then hopefully by the end of July or maybe mid-August, pretty much everybody who wanted to be vaccinated and who is qualified to be vaccinated, then they receive their vaccinations. But for now, we are facing many restrictions in terms of travel because of the current surge. For example, in Alberta, which its population is about 4 million, 4.3, 4.4 million, which is less than 1/3 of Ontario, we had more than 2,200 cases yesterday. And that's a huge number. It means as if in Ontario, multiply whatever numbers we have by around 2.5. So we have to be very careful and do not get excited in terms of traveling to Canada nowadays. If you submit a TRV application, it is likely that nobody will review even that application. And by TRV, I'm referring to a visit visa to Canada, unless you apply for an exemption. So you apply for TRV and then you send a request to the immigration authorities and ask them to give you an exemption because you have a family member in Canada or something similar. And that will help you to encourage them to process your application. If you go through that process, the processing time is 2 business weeks. So in other words, it takes about 3 weeks for them to review your request and whether approve it or refuse it. If they approve your request, then you quickly can receive a temporary resident visa and you could travel to Canada with an exemption. However, as I mentioned, there are many limitations nowadays and a huge reluctance by the government of Canada to issue temporary resident visas. And that kind of application needs to be done through email, okay? And the next thing that you need to know is about travel restrictions from Pakistan and from India. So the government has canceled all direct flights from India and Pakistan And that had caused a lot of trouble for people. Actually, I have two prospects that they are destined to be removed from Canada, and both of them, they are basically facing a removal order. However, the government cannot send them back to India because the flights to India are canceled. Some people may think that because direct flights are canceled, so they may travel to Canada indirectly. So in other words, for example, from Pakistan, you go to Istanbul, and then from Istanbul, you travel directly to Canada. But the issue is that if you use indirect flights, then you need to show a negative test result from your connecting city. So in other words, if you go from, for example, uh, Lahore to Istanbul, then you also need to show your negative test results from Istanbul to be able to fly to Canada. So you have to be very careful with that. Okay, so that's about travel restrictions. Okay, we have a bunch of questions. I will try to read those questions and answer those questions. Then I will come back and talk about something else, which is inadmissibility to Canada. You have to know about this. Okay, so Sean Lee says, good morning, Mr. Parsai. Good morning, Mr. Lee. Mookie says, good day, sir. Quick question. I have PNPPR in process since 2018. Should I apply for work permit now to enter Canada? So I honestly cannot offer you immigration advice. I don't know what is your application for PNP, why you can or cannot apply for work permit. But generally speaking, so this is a very generic answer. Generally speaking, if you have applied for permanent residence, you may at the same time apply for temporary residence. And in fact, we have a section of the Immigration Act, Section 22, Sub 2, that says that it's called dual intent. It says that an immigration officer may not refuse an application for temporary residence because you applied for permanent residence. So in other words, if you have applied for permanent residence to Canada, whether it is PNP or federal or Quebec, and then you apply for temporary residence in Canada, an officer cannot refuse your temporary residence application, whether it is work permit, study permit, or visit visa, because you applied for permanent residence. Of course, they may still refuse you, but not based on your permanent residence application, but based on other stuff. But at the end of the day, they cannot say, oh, you applied for permanent residence, so I refuse your temporary residence application. You have a more difficult time in convincing the immigration authorities that if your temporary residence visa is issued when you come to Canada, you will leave Canada by the end of your authorized stay. It's more difficult for you to prove that comparing to somebody who has no permanent resident application. But that's set aside. It is okay if people apply for permanent residence and temporary residence at the same time. And sometimes their temporary residence application helps them. For example, for my federal self-employed class clients, I've had clients in the past that we applied for their temporary residence for their work permit while their self-employed class application was in process. The government issued my client's work permit. He came to Canada, he started his job, and they started their job in Canada. We informed the immigration authorities that they've already started their self-employed activities in Canada, and guess what? They approved their permanent residence. They realize that this person is serious about self-employed. So that's why whenever somebody wants to sign up with us for federal self-employed class, we encourage them that they get a work permit first, come to Canada, start their self-employed activities, then apply for federal self-employed class. But that's an exceptional situation that these two go hand in hand. In other situations, if they do not go hand in hand, that's absolutely okay. As long as there are no contradictions between these two applications. You cannot in one application say I am a doctor and the other application you say I'm a welder. Obviously, if there are contradictions, then there will result into misrepresentation, etc. So they need to basically match each other and show that you are the same person with the same skill set, education, etc., and you are a truthful person. And of course, in the temporary resident application, you need to prove to them that you will leave Canada by the end of your legal stay or authorized stay in Canada. So that's the gist of it. But what's happening to your specific case, I cannot offer advice to you. If you want official advice, you can book an appointment with me. I will review your situation, and then based on that, I will give you advice. So Sean says, is IRCC still processing the applications under CC if the applicants happen to be outside Canada? Would IRCC process the CC applications where the principal is onshore while families are offshore? So the simple answer is yes, they process the applications. If the CEC applicant is outside Canada, the issue is that when they become permanent residents, they cannot travel to Canada to validate their application. Otherwise, yes, they will process the applications. Having said that, I have right now, as we speak, I have CEC applications that we submitted last year, and they are not processed yet. I mean, they are not finalized yet. They are processing them, but they are not finalizing them. So the processing, even for CEC applicants, they are very slow. So if somebody is invited today, nowadays they give them 90 days to finalize their application. So let's say they finalize their application in a month or two from now. So by the end of June, they have a complete application in place. But it is likely at the pace that we see today, they will finalize this application by summer of next year. So by summer of next year, hopefully everything, all the travel restrictions are gone and those people can easily travel. But when they say Canadian experience class, they do not discriminate between those people who are inside Canada or outside Canada, because statistically speaking, about 90% of those people, or over 90% of them, they are inside Canada. Now, for that 10% or so that are outside Canada, it doesn't matter, because even if they process them, they may not even be able to travel to Canada at this moment, but they won't finalize them today, so it shouldn't be an issue. So Mickey says, I have my brother living in Ontario. He's an immigrant. Could this help me to get priority? So again, I cannot comment on your specific case because I don't know what's going on. But if you're talking about priority in terms of processing your work permit application, no, having a brother or sister in Canada does not give anybody a priority. For the work permit applications, we have a specific list that they qualify you for work permit, 2-week processing of work permit. So if your work permit that you are applying is exempt from the requirements of an LMIA, you could be qualified for a 2-week processing. If you, I'm just looking up to make sure I'm not making mistakes in terms of who is. So if you are LMIA exempt, then you qualify for 2-week processing of work permit. If your job is submitted properly, you have a job offer through employer account, the application is online, and the job is either NOC 0 or NOC A. So these are for LMIA exempt work permits. For LMIA requires they must fall under global talent stream. So if they fall under global talent stream, then it means that they will process the application in 2 weeks. Having said that, I have many clients that they fall under 2-week processing duration. I have requested explicitly from the immigration authorities, based on this policy, please process the application in 2 weeks, and so far nothing, no response. And partly because most of work permit applications are being processed outside Canada, And because of that, because the visa offices are closed, they don't process. For example, many of my clients, they are from India, and unfortunately the visa offices, you know the situation in India. It's not just the visa office, it's the whole fiasco that unfortunately we have in India. I have many clients from Iran and other countries that their application is being processed in Ankara, and guess what, right now Turkey is in a lockdown. So we don't expect applications to be processed quickly. I've had clients in Mexico City that we communicated with the visa office in Mexico City to expedite processing their applications. And they said, no, the government has told us only to process two groups of applications, healthcare workers and agricultural workers. So pushing it to get the quick processing, it's almost impossible. Sometimes it's doable. I have a client from Mexico that he had to be here in May. It was a must for him to be in May, to be in Canada in May. And for that person, we communicated with Mexico City, and they transferred the application from Mexico City to CPC Edmonton. And in fact, CPC Edmonton processed the application very quickly, and they issued the work permit. It's actually one of my records for online applications. This client signed up with us on April 12th, and he received his work permit on April 25th. So in other words, in exactly 2 weeks from the time they signed up with us to the time that he received his work permit, it was only 2 weeks. So they processed his work permit application in about a week, in about 9 days, because it took us about 5 days to prepare his application and submit it, and another 9 days for them to process the application. But that was an urgent issue, and we communicated that through different channels, and luckily that worked. But that's the only exception I have about 2-week processing. With the rest of my 2-week processing applications, not really. Even I have clients from Hong Kong, and Hong Kong is right now on the expedited list. And my client is a 2-week processing kind of application from Hong Kong, and we have pushed the government over and over again, and nothing. So you have to be very flexible in terms of accepting the fact that matters do not process properly nowadays. Don't expect that things will work properly. Hopefully, I keep my fingers crossed that by at least by mass vaccinations in Canada, that we are not that much worried about the virus anymore. We gradually see opening of the borders, and hopefully, with the help of the world, I hope that now people see the guidelines by WHO that this is a global issue. It's not a local issue. Assist those countries that they are suffering to curb the problem, and hopefully we'll see the borders are open. We're back to normal. Honestly, seeing being back to normal in 2021, it's very unlikely to me, but let's see. We will see some positive things happening in 2021, but not everything. Okay, so where is the next question? Oh, Andy is here. Hi, Andy. Good to see you. So Shiba Tal, hi, can we expect more business immigration options in near future? So it looks like the answer to your question is no. So when the federal government of Canada decided to increase the number of immigrants to Canada, they because last year, of course, we didn't meet the caps and targets, and they decided to increase those numbers this year, the year after, and the year after. So this year we were supposed to accept 401,000 immigrants. Next year, I believe 435,000, and the year after 450,000. but they increased the number of applicants in under pretty much every program or most of the program. But when it came to business immigration, they didn't touch it. So the targets for business immigrants per year under federal programs is only 1,000. And this 1,000 is the number of people who immigrate to Canada under business programs, not the number of applications. So, in other words, if we say in an application we have about 3 people, then we are looking at anywhere between 300 to maybe 400 applications in total for all business people from all over the world. Now, what are the business immigration options to Canada? We only have 2 business immigration options under federal programs. One is federal self-employed class, which covers self-employed or world-class athletes and artists. The other program is called Startup Visa. So the total allocation to Startup Visa and federal self-employed class is about 300 to 400 applications per year, even nowadays. So that means that the government has no appetite to increase the number of business immigrants, at least for 2021, to Canada. Having said that, and there are opportunities for business people through provinces, and those opportunities are serious. For example, all the provinces, they have entrepreneur, or most of them, they have entrepreneur applications. For example, through Quebec, there is a self-employed class specific to self-employed people, albeit they only accept 50 people, 50 applications per year, but they do accept it. For British Columbia, the entrepreneur program is very active. Ontario has its entrepreneur program. Saskatchewan has an entrepreneur program. Manitoba has it, etc. Even Alberta, that never had a business, or at least in recent years, they didn't have a business class immigration. They recently added a business class immigration, albeit it's a very twisted kind of immigration. If you're interested, you can look it up on our website. I have an article about this program, but it's basically for people who have recently graduated from a university outside Canada and they want to invest in Alberta and immigrate to Canada. So those programs are there. If you're interested through provinces, you can immigrate as a business person, and it's up to the business whether to increase or decrease the number of applicants they accept. Ontario is not that much active in terms of accepting business immigrants, yet on average, they accept around 100 to 150 applications, sometimes even more, sometimes close to 200 applications per year. So that's another increase in the target. So if you're a business person, and if you cannot focus on a startup, which is, by the way, the most probably, both federal self-employed class and startup, these are probably the most difficult options to immigrate to Canada. But if you cannot target those, then think about a province and see if you qualify for that province. When I started my business more than 10 years ago, my focus was on Manitoba. I had many clients to Manitoba, and then I expanded to Saskatchewan. Still, those 2 programs are going very strong. Okay. So where are we? I think I lost some. So sorry, I'm just lost in the questions. Okay. Oh, okay. Found it. So Sean Siddiqui says, I'm about to submit my study permit application from outside of Canada. Can you please suggest some general tips on what I should ensure in my application? Well, in a study permit application, it depends on the applicant. I mean, at the end of the day, the decision making by the officer is based on Section 216 of the application of the immigration regulations. And Section 216 focuses on a few things, and one of them is, of course, the admission, having an acceptance letter, a good acceptance letter. The other one is that you need to have enough financial resources to show that you can pay the fees. I always recommend to everybody to pay their the tuition fee for the first year in full. And then, of course, if somebody is applying through SDS, that's more channeled and more straightforward. It depends on the nationality of the person. It depends on how much gap is between the studies. It depends on the level of studies, whether you are doing a master's program, etc. I think nowadays, study permit applications are more tricky, with the exception of if somebody is coming from a European country, for example, to apply for a study permit. Generally speaking, it's more tricky. I see many refusals. And, again, it's up to you, Sean. I'm not saying hire me, don't get me wrong. It's up to you, but you're going to spend thousands of dollars in tuition fee. And believe me, if you hire somebody, the amount that they're asking from you is less than your air ticket to Canada. But at least if a professional team review your applications, they could uh, prepare a complete application. Let's put it that way. Maybe they will still refuse your application, but at least you have submitted a complete application, and that application could enhance your chances of success. And even if they refuse you, it can enhance your chances of filing for judicial review and fighting for your application. But generally, if I can talk about it, it's money, having a good SOP in place, justification of why you are coming to Canada to study from all over this world, those kind of things. Okay, so Miki says, thanks for your response. Appreciate it. Actually meant if I could get a priority because of the travel restrictions, because being an extended member of an immigration makes me travel exempt. So again, generally speaking, Muki, yes, if somebody receives a travel exemption and at the same time a work permit or a study permit or a visit visa, then that person can travel to Canada. Whether they will process a work permit because of travel exemption, to the best of my knowledge, is no. The policy for processing a work permit quickly is very clear. It says for those people that they are as I mentioned, if it's LMI exempt, is a NOC 0 or A, and it meets certain other requirements. If it's LMIA accepted, then it's global talent stream. With other work permit applications, they won't expedite processing the application. But if somebody applies for a travel exemption and they have a TRV application in place, then they will quickly review that TRV application as well. But will they extend that to work permit or study permit? They haven't mentioned that in their guidelines, to the best of my knowledge. But I would say it's at the discretion of the officer whether to even consider it. Okay. So Sean Lee says, thanks, Mr. Parsai. Just a follow-up question on my last question on CC. I have a friend who is CC applicant and submitted his application last year. I'm wondering if his application is delayed purposely because no, it's not. No, there is no deliberate reason for processing the applications late. I have clients that they are currently inside Canada and their application was submitted more than a year ago and has not been processed yet. So it has nothing to do with being outside Canada. However, being outside Canada could delay matters because, again, there is a component that needs to be done by the visa office. And if the visa office is involved and the visa office is not working full time, then it will delay the process. And so Andy says, did you get my email message with the ATIP report? To be honest with you, Andy, I have not opened my emails since yesterday. Yesterday, it's the first day that I decided not to review any of my emails. So, but I will, if you have sent me an email, your email is first priority. I will take a look at it. So Martin says, how long did asylum application processing? Okay, sure, Andy. Thank you very much. I'm pretty sure I will. So the next question is, how long did asylum application processing took before COVID? Was it less? How long should it generally take to get a PR card after your hearing is approved? So Martin, before COVID, it depended on which city your application was submitted. And also whether Section 170F applied to you or not. It's very difficult to say because, for example, before COVID, the processing time for having a hearing, for example, in Vancouver was about 1 year and a quarter. In Toronto was about 1.5 years. But suddenly, if you considered a less complex application, and by less complex, it means that for some reason RPD decided to apply Section 170F, then in those situations, you could get your permanent resident or protection even without going through a hearing. And so it's very difficult to come up with this exact processing time for this group. And what happened after COVID, we had a huge delay and actually cancellations of all the hearings between March and July of 2020. So about 4 months, RPD canceled all the hearings. And then what happened was that after canceling the hearings, when they resumed the hearings in August, then they said that now we need to go back to those hearings that we canceled and reschedule them. And also, they were developing the technology to make the hearings online. So they tried to use, nowadays they use Microsoft Teams. So it took them a while to fully adopt to the technology, and they had lots of hearings that they were canceled, and then they resumed the process. So I see some in my cases, I see some discrepancies. For example, I have a client that he submitted his application in March 2018. His hearing was supposed to be actually on the 4th. Then I received a call from the court or RPD, and they said that we cannot run the hearing on that date, and they delayed the hearing by another about 34 days. So these things could also happen. Nowadays, especially, they are more common. But at the same time, I had some clients that I submitted their basis of claim in late 2019, and guess what? Next week they have their hearings. So it's very difficult to say how it works nowadays. The other issue is with the new applications. So in the past, if you came to my office and said you want to file for refugee, we worked with you, we prepared the basis of claim and all the documents and forms and everything, and then you could go to their office in Etobicoke here in Toronto, and they process your application almost the same day or in about 1 week to 9 days. So basically, your IRCC portion was done in about a week or two or even less. And then by the end of that 1 week or 2 weeks, you had your IFHB, which is the interim federal health care coverage, and you used to receive your work permit in 3 weeks or so. And then after that, you were just to wait for your hearing. Unfortunately, nowadays, the process is not like that. So we make a request through an email to IRCC. They sent me a secure message through ePost Connect. Then I respond to that secure message through ePost Connect with the forms and documents that we have already prepared. Then we have to wait. several weeks before they invite my clients for biometrics. They go do their biometrics, they send them back home, and then they said, we will send you another email to call you for an interview. And then if the interview goes well, then that's when they issue the work permit. So unfortunately, it could take even 8 months, 9 months, or even 1 year before you have even your work permit in your hand, let alone talking about a hearing. Because when they interview and process the work permit application, that's when they pass the information to RPD to put you in line for an interview. Now, in certain situations when we are in a dire mode, I can call because I have contact, not that it's not just me, anybody who deals with refugees. I have contacts with case managers. I call the case manager and I ask them if there is a possibility to arrange a hearing for my client. And if they have, by chance, they have a spot available, then and the client is at a point that they are ready to book a hearing for them, they book a hearing. So there is a chance that sometimes we can move around things a little bit, but generally speaking, the situation is not good right now. So this is for inside Canada, by the way. For outside Canada cases, I don't do resettling, so I don't know what's going on over there, but at least based on the news that I'm hearing or rumors that I'm hearing, the processing is painstakingly slow, very slow. Okay. So the next question. The next question is from Sanyam Pandya. Sir, my SINP file timeline as follows. Applied on February 2020th, in process September 2020th, not getting any updates after that. How much time will they take the results? Kindly guide. So again, I cannot comment on specific cases. What I can tell you is that Saskatchewan is usually very good in replying to emails. So all you need to do is send them an email and ask them. Okay, at least for me, that's my personal. And I don't do. I actually stopped working with Saskatchewan because I didn't have many clients. So I stopped working with Saskatchewan back in December. But when I was working with them, they were really good. I mean, every time I had a question about a client and I sent them an email, they replied back to me usually in less than 72 hours. So my suggestion to you is that just email them and ask them this question directly, and they will come up with an answer. So whether it's a generic answer that gives you an idea what's going on, or it could be a specific answer to your question. Okay. So do you believe that, Martin says, do you believe that the processing time will decrease until the summer of 2020? That's our hope. Yes, that's what we are hoping for. So because RPD has developed some technology, and in fact, I was talking to one of the case managers, and she told me that IRB members, as you call them, the judges, they are very happy with this online format and it's working well for them. So if that's the case, this means that we will see the online platform to continue at least partially, even after the system, this fiasco is over. And that means that we have now better distribution of hearings. Right now, I give you example. I have a client who is in Ontario, but his hearing is in Edmonton. I have another client who is in yeah, I have one client that is in Ontario. They transferred his file completely. This is not a refugee hearing. This is an appeal hearing. But they transferred the whole documents to Vancouver, and now they are holding the hearing in Edmonton, Alberta. And this is possible because now we have online system. So Edmonton is less occupied. Now they can take some of the cases from Toronto. I have a refugee client that he is again in Ontario, but his application, his hearing is in Vancouver. And when they transferred the whole thing to Vancouver, I asked them why you did that. And they said, because we had here some spots available and we decided to run the hearing in Vancouver. And it doesn't matter to me because we are doing it online. In fact, I had a hearing the other week and my client was in Ottawa. The hearing was in Montreal and I was in Toronto. But we could facilitate that because of the online system. In fact, in January, I was doing a hearing, and it was really good because my client was in Mashhad, which is a city in Iran. I was in Toronto, and the judge was also in Ontario. So we kind of managed to have a video conference about that case because of the online system. So I believe that the online system, Martin, will enhance the processing time significantly. The technology that is being offered by Microsoft Teams is actually very good. So it's that the environment is very similar to Zoom. So people, they get acquainted to that fairly quickly and they can handle it. So I believe that that will enhance the processing times. But how and when, and it's very difficult to say. And at the same time, did I tell you about discrepancies about which city you are from? Now that will reduce, because now people from Ontario could be processed in another province, and that would reduce the wait times in major urban areas like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal, because now we could conduct those hearings in other places. So, the next question is that, did you register with SK as a consultant? Yes, I did, Andy, and I was a registered consultant up until December. But it was more than a year or two that I didn't have, actually more than 2 years, that I didn't have a client. And I sent them a message and I said, you know what, I don't want this anymore. And whenever I want to, if I have a client, I can easily register with them anyways. So the next question is that after that your hearing is done and you have your approval, then you apply for PR. How long will that take to arrive? Can you travel outside Canada while your PR is still ready? So Martin, the simple answer to your question is that nobody knows the answer to that question, because by default, those applications will go to CPC in CPC Edmonton. And the CPC Edmonton right now hardly processes any applications. I mean, I have TRP applications that are stuck in there for several months. The caregiver applications are stuck in there for several months. In fact, we have right now about 6,000 applications under caregiver pilot programs that they are stuck in CPC Edmonton, that they have not been processed. Another 1,500 permanent resident applications that are stuck in there. And that's why the Minister Mendicino recently made a promise to caregiver applicants that they will process their applications by the end of this year. So what will happen to refugee applications? No words from the government yet. But the good news is that if you are a refugee, if you're a protected person in Canada, it means that you have received your positive answer from RPD, no objections by IRCC, you become a protected person. As a protected person, you can apply for permanent residence. And when you apply for permanent residence, you still have the work permit. If you want to study, you can receive a study permit. And in terms of traveling outside Canada, you can apply for a travel document. The government will issue you a travel document. That travel document resembles a Canadian passport. The difference is that when you open it, inside the passport, it says your nationality instead of Canadian. And then with that passport, you can travel anywhere but the country that you have come from. I mean, the country that you claim refugee from. So you can basically travel anywhere in the world, but you are considered your own nationality. So for example, if you are, say, a national of Iraq, then you are considered an Iraqi citizen despite holding a Canadian travel document. And this means that, for example, if you want to go to Germany, you need to apply for a visa to Germany as an Iraqi citizen. Whether they will issue the visa or not, that's a completely different story. Okay. So it says, I assume that you get your travel document a month after your hearing approval. Yeah, when you receive the written judgment by the RPD, that opens doors for you a lot to apply for different things. So I was going to talk about inadmissibility, but 50 minutes has passed. And I'm still answering questions, but that's good. I'm happy that we had lots of questions. So before I close this session, I just quickly talk about inadmissibility because sometimes people do not get this seriously, and I'm dealing with this. Believe me, right now I'm dealing with two cases. One of them is unfortunately detained in Canada, and the other one is received a removal order from Canada. And both of them are students that they stopped studying in Canada. So if somebody just contradicts the immigration law and disobeys the immigration law, then there are significant consequences for you. You have to be very careful with that. So basically, as soon as the government thinks that a person wants to work in Canada without a permit, without authorization, then they could remove that person from Canada. I have a client that my client holds or held a visa to Canada and also had applied for permanent residence to Canada. So last year he traveled to Canada, and this is true story. I make some changes just to protect the privacy of my client. So my client traveled to Canada last year. He stayed here for about 7 or 8 months and then left Canada legally, by the way, because he applied for extension and then he left Canada. Then after a few months, he came back to Canada. At the port of entry, which was the airport in Montreal, the officer suspects that he's coming back to Canada to work. So they ask for his cell phone, and they look into his cell phone and they find some pictures of him with hard hat at a construction site. And the officer says, "Oh, you're working here. You're working here. You are not a visitor." So they issued an exclusion order for him on the spot. They removed him from Canada. Now, the problem is that this has also jeopardized his permanent residence application. So we had to apply for an authorization to return to Canada, an ARC, to alleviate any issues with his permanent resident application. That extra expenses, imagine that you're coming to Canada, you pay for the travel tickets, you're forced to go back to Canada. Think about all the hassles at the airport. And then eventually he went back home, and now he is inadmissible to Canada for 1 year. And then we had to apply for authorization to return to Canada. The ARC application is not being processed because the visa office that is processing those applications, they do not really process ARC applications at this moment. And at the same time, his permanent resident application could be in jeopardy because of that incident and inadmissibility. Of course, we have communicated with his the office that is processing his PR application. We have told them what happened and what's going on. But at the end of the day, you have to be very careful. Simple matters. I mean, the person who is currently, as I told you, in prison in Canada is because he had a study permit, and the study permit expired and he remained in Canada. So imagine that you spend days in prison and being removed from Canada just because your study permit expired and you didn't extend your stay in Canada, or you didn't comply with the Immigration Act. Sometimes people think that spending like $200 on a consultation session is too much. But thinking about the time that you could save, thinking about the money that you could save over the months, if you receive proper advice, obviously, if you book an appointment with somebody that they don't know the law, then that will put you in trouble. But if you follow good advice, then it will prevent you from the hassles. And these are the simplest things. I mean, overstaying in Canada, working without authorization. These are simple matters. Sometimes more complex issues happen. I'm dealing with a case that my client had some criminal convictions in Canada, and that resulted in him being removed from Canada. The police came to their home, they handcuffed him, they removed him from Canada, and it took him years, being separate from his wife in Canada, to eventually receive his pardon. And then after receiving the pardon, we could apply for sponsorship application. And now, hopefully, we are in a position that he will receive his permanent residence. But it took us months to try to resolve those issues. So you are not supposed to know the immigration law. The immigration law is a complex thing. Look, this is the immigration law, of course, different sections. So you are not supposed to know this, but despite that, you are supposed to follow it. And how can you follow something that you don't know anything about? The only way that you can do that is to refer to somebody who knows this law and who can offer you proper immigration advice. So anyways, thank you very much for attending this session. So Martin says, is the travel document the only thing you need to travel? Don't you need your PR card as well? So for travel documents, when you are a protected person for coming back to Canada, you need to make arrangements with the government of Canada, but you don't need a PR. You don't have a PR card. So the very purpose of that travel document to allow you to go outside Canada and come back. And this is a specific measure for protected people. So, oh, more questions are coming. So, hi, Mr. Parsai, good to see you. So this is from Zaidi. When you receive an order of removal from your refugee hearing, what are the options? So the removal order, if somebody receives a refused refugee decision, then of course they have the right to appeal that decision with some exceptions. So the matter could go to the refugee appeal division, and if you fail that and then you receive a removal order, then you could also file for judicial review. So that's a possibility under Section 72 of the Act. The other possibility is that after 1 year that you receive the final refusal, you have the option to apply for pre-removal risk assessment or file for humanitarian and compassionate considerations. These are the options that are available to refugees. But meanwhile, within that 1 year, CBSA has the authority to find you, locate you, and remove you from Canada. So can you, Hussein says, Hussein Irashai, hello, Hussein. Can you apply for asylum and after 3 months apply for PR with your common law partner before your asylum application is done? So the simple answer is yes. We have a public policy in terms of who may apply for inland permanent resident application. I have that article actually on my website. So let me just find it and give you. But you need to make sure that that public policy applies to you. If the public policy applies to the applicant, then they could apply for permanent residence without a without the status in Canada. Keep that in mind. If somebody comes to Canada and files for asylum, and then right after that, they file for a PR through a spousal sponsorship, then the first thing that crosses the immigration officer's mind is Section 4. And Section 4 is basically says that this marriage is not genuine. It is created in bad faith because this person wants to become a permanent resident of Canada. So that's why if a scenario like this happens, and I've had clients of this nature, when they come to my office, I review their application to make sure that the marriage, at least in my opinion, the marriage is genuine. Because if it's not, then they will refuse the application. But if the marriage is genuine and they can prove that, then the answer is that technically speaking, for most refugee, not all of them, but for most refugee claimants, it is possible that they also apply for permanent residence under inland class. And the only reason they can do it is because of a public policy that was issued initially in 2005, and it's going strong even in 2021. Okay. So we have passed our 1 hour. Thank you very much for attending this session. Again, for those of you who are tuning in right now, my name is Al Parsai. I'm a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. I have been practicing for the past 10 years. This is my book, 88 Tips on Immigration to Canada. It has been identified by Amazon.ca as the bestseller under the immigration law. Please consider purchasing this book to support me. And of course, if you want to find me, it's very easy. Just look up my name, go and you will easily find us. But our website, official website, is settler.ca. Again, see you next Sunday at 10 a.m. EST. Last week I was very busy to produce videos, but hopefully starting from this week, again, we will have 3 videos per week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. See you next week. Bye now.